Hello, and welcome to this lecture on Chapter 9, Survey Research. When we look at surveys, there's really two main types of surveys. There are descriptive surveys, which are surveys that set out to describe the characteristics of some sort of population. And then there are analytic surveys, those that try to determine what sort of variables are playing a role in people's behaviors and how they may be related. I think when most people think of surveys, what they think of is this descriptive survey here. Something that says what percentage of the population has a certain characteristic, holds a certain opinion, or engages in a particular behavior. So for example, if somebody was standing outside a grocery store and asked you, what is your political beliefs? That could be a survey that would look at, how conservative or liberal you are. An analytics survey, on the other hand, might try to figure out what sort of variables are related when we're not sure what sort of variables play a role in some sort of behavior. So, for example, let's say that we have an outbreak of me mama. We don't know what me mama is. It is some new disease, and we're trying to figure out what causes me mama. When we look at me mama, we ask people about maybe a lot of their health behaviors. We also ask them what they like to do, what sort of genetic conditions they may have. And by surveying all of this information, what we can do is we can then use correlation or regression to try and figure out what sort of variables are related to one another to cause me mama. So there are really two main types of surveys here. Irregardless of what type of survey you have, you need to be very careful when you set up your survey. In order to develop a good survey, you really have to go through a process. And that process starts with, how do you want to gather your information? What sort of instrument do you want to use? Do you want to do an in-person interview? Would you like to call people on the phone? Would you like to do this over the internet? How would you like to go ahead and gather the data? Because when you're looking at how you're gathering information, you're also going to dictate the type of instrument that you're creating along the way. Let's say we want to try and do an internet survey to figure out what sort of political views students at Mount St. Mary's have. Now that we've identified we're going to do this online, this is going to be a type of descriptive survey. Now we need to identify the types of questions to use. That is our second step. There are many different types of questions we could use. We could use yes-no questions, where the respondent has to answer yes or no to the question. So for example, we could say, are you liberal? And then the answer choices here would be yes and no. We could also use the idea of a forced alternative question, which is where people must select between two alternative responses. So for example, we could say, what is your political viewpoint? And we could offer the opportunity to be liberal or conservative. We could also utilize multiple choice questions. That is, where people have to choose the most suitable response from several alternatives. So this could look at, what is your belief about the role of government? And then choices could be something like, I believe government should have full control over our lives. I believe that the government should have some control over my life. I believe that the government should have no control over my life. Here they would have to choose between multiple options in order to best answer the question. Another example that we could have is a Likert type scale. And Likert scales are ones where we look at some sort of level of agreement, and that is scaled from either 1 to 5 or 1 to 7 typically. So for example, if we were saying, I believe that government should play a large role in regulating safety concerns. You would have the choice of strongly disagree, undecided, agree, or strongly agree. Or we could ask people open-ended questions. And open-ended questions are just a question stem and then no sort of answer choices put in front of them. It's just a blank box. So for example, we could say, what is your political perspective? And we just see what sort of answers we get back. There are advantages and disadvantages to using each of these types of questions. Sometimes these forced alternative questions really don't allow people to answer questions in a way that allows you to see other critical variables that may be related to your variable of interest. So for example, we could ask about political outlook all we want, but if we never ask about social economic status, we may not uncover the fact that typically people who tend to be more well-off also tend to be more conservative. Open-ended questions, though, while they would allow us to see a lot of different variables of interest because people could write about what most influences their political ideologies, it's time-consuming and it's a lot of information to process and make sense of at the end of the survey. But let's say that we've chosen our questions now. Once we've chosen the types of questions that we have, we want to actually write out what those questions are, and this is our third step. When you write a question, you want to make sure that the question is clear, it's short, and it's specific. You also want to make sure that it's at an appropriate reading level for the individuals that you want to test. So if we're testing college students here, we want to make sure that this is at an appropriate level that college students can read. But if we were asking second graders their opinion on whether cats or dogs are better, well, then we should make sure that this is, of course, at a second grade reading level. And you can do that simply by, after running Word, you just go through some of the options on your spell check and it'll tell you your reading level. Once you've got the questions written up, the fourth thing that you want to do is you want to pilot test your questions. That is, you want to seek opinions from knowledgeable people in the field to say, does it sound like an appropriate question? Am I missing a question? Should I reorder these questions? Because getting opinions from experts will help you in ways that will help you consider things that you did not yet consider. And pilot testing the data on a smaller group of participants would allow you to see what is it like to actually administer the survey. Once you've pilot tested this, you want to make sure that you also determine any sort of relevant demographic data that you want to collect. So people's age, ethnicity, backgrounds, characteristics. What ones are relevant? What ones do you not need to include? Last, you want to make sure you create an administration procedure and develop instructions. So if this is an online survey, well, we need to make sure that people understand they need to choose the answer choice that best represents what they believe. And that's only one choice. We don't want people maybe selecting multiple answers here. If we want them, though, to select all of the answer choices that apply, then we want to make that clear as part of the instructions. If we're using the survey in a way that we're going to publish the results, we also want to make sure that we're looking at informed consent. So now I've outlined the 6 main steps in survey research. Thank you for listening to this lecture on survey research.